Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. And if you hear thumping and crunching, I'm sorry. There's a construction project going on outside, but it's a good one. We don't have to get into those details. One of you asked me, and it was a very good question, what is a reference recording? Or, as we say in French, a version de référence. Well, a reference recording, well, you think it's obvious, right? I understand that you know what I'm saying. It's the one that we refer to when we make comparisons between recordings. It's the exemplar for the work in question. But where does it come from? How do we arrive at a version de référence? Well, it's really actually not at all straightforward. It's like everything in the classical music universe, rather subjective. But it's something that we critics as professionals try to do in order to make the job of comparison easier. So first of all, what is a reference recording? A reference recording is a really good performance. It doesn't have to be the best performance. Usually there cannot be the best performance, but it's one that is generally acknowledged to be superior. That you need, because in order to make a comparison between that recording and other recordings, you need one that is generally acknowledged to be superior. Now, behind the concept of generally acknowledged to be superior is the idea that most collectors, not all, but most knowledgeable classical music aficionados will know this performance. They'll know this recording, so that when you talk about other versions in comparison to this one, they'll know what you're talking about. It'll make some kind of sense. So selecting a reference recording involves a certain amount of speculation about what the general universe of classical music knows. And we as professional critics have an obligation, a professional obligation, to sort of know what these recordings are, to know what our colleagues have written over the years. Most of these recordings are not brand new, unless they're like unbelievably amazing. And so we have to know what the literature has been on these recordings, and we have to know what our feeling is, and this is where it gets sort of squishy, but our feeling is that there is a consensus about what the best recordings of a work are. And to a remarkable degree, there is a consensus. There really is. I mean, there's a billion recordings of everything, but when it comes to certain works, certain iconic works that are part of the classical canon, there is a real consensus as to what the better performances are. And this has nothing to do with whether you like them or not, with whether I like them or not. It has to do with what the consensus is. It's about attempting to put your finger on, gasp, a fact. An actual fact. I mean, a piece of information which is valid. And again, it's not about whether we like these or not. It's just about the fact that they exist and people have acknowledged them. There are many recordings that are reference recordings which I don't particularly care for or I don't think are the best versions. But they're used. They're useful. They're useful as points of comparison. So that's what a reference recording is. Now, let me give you a typical example of such. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. The reference recording, since it came out at this point, well, not since it came out, but it's evolved since it came out, is the Carlos Kleiber Vienna Philharmonic performance of Beethoven's Fifth. It's gotten unbelievable accolades over the decades. It's a very fine performance. It's not my favorite performance, but it's a very fine performance, and it's useful. It's useful if you want to hear a really good, solid performance of Beethoven's Fifth to make comparisons in terms of what other performances may be doing. That's a good one. It's a good one to hang your hat on. And you'll never wind up being a fool if you say, oh, I really like the Carlos Kleiber Beethoven Fifth in Vienna. I mean, it's a wonderful performance. So that's an idea of what a reference recording can be. But because you asked, and because I think it's really a very interesting topic, I'm going to inaugurate a new series, Reference Recordings, where we're going to pick individual works and talk about what the reference recordings are. Now, this will, of course, be my opinion, but my opinion about what reference recordings are will be arrived at in consultation with my colleagues in the critical fraternity. Because again, there is consensus and there's a lot of discussion back and forth. I wish there were more, quite frankly. There ought to be a classical Bureau of Consensus Reference Recordings that we all belong to, that keeps an updated list. That would be very helpful, wouldn't it? But there isn't. But the fact is, I will talk to my friends, and we do this all the time. We say, gee, I think this is the reference, or what do you think is the best, and what should I use as the point of comparison? And those conversations are always ongoing. And so the opinion you get isn't just mine. It's a little bit broader than that, for what it's worth. For what it's worth. And the other thing you need to keep in mind when we talk about reference recordings is that not every work has a reference recording. In fact, many don't. For example, we talked about Beethoven's Fifth, and we'll do a separate video on that, I think, just to launch the series. But not all the Beethoven symphonies have reference recordings, because not all of them are important enough. I mean, no one cares about Beethoven's First Symphony. You may love it. I love it. It's a wonderful symphony. But it's not a work of such significance that people have gotten together and decided, oh, there is one performance of Beethoven's First Symphony, which is the reference against which all others must be compared. It doesn't work that way. The big important ones will have reference recordings. The little less important ones, not so much. The same thing with Beethoven's piano sonatas or other people's chamber works or whatever. Certain pieces earn reference status. And they do it when the performance is great, when there are enough recordings to choose from to make it make sense, and when the work is considered one of the linchpins of the classical canon. All of that goes into it, because there has to be enough buzz surrounding specific recordings of particular works so that a consensus emerges, and you can identify which is the reference recording. Now, some pieces have multiple reference recordings because there are multiple fabulous performances. And if they have a wide range of interpretive options open to them, you may want to have more than one. You may want to have the Furtwängler style Brahms reference and the Zell Toscanini style Brahms reference. Those can happen as well. It's not written in stone, but that's what a reference recording is. And so I think we will do a series of reference recordings of various works, just so that we can make the point, and so that you can, if you wish, listen to recordings that you may not know about or which you may not care for. I think it's a very useful thing, frankly. Listen to recordings that you don't think are the best, but which are nevertheless references, so that you understand how the music's supposed to go and what people are getting at, and you figure out your own taste from that point of view. And you can like or dislike as you please, but know what the reference is. That's the point. So there you have it, my friends. I hope this answers the question. And I will look forward to talking about this some more in some future videos. So keep on listening and take care.